I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, a path to peace. The Vatican's peace envoy, Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, meets with lawmakers and President Biden to discuss the widespread suffering in Ukraine. We have the details. Fighting for freedom. Global leaders testify on Capitol Hill about religious persecution around the world. What you need to know. Unprecedented. Iraq's president revokes his recognition of the patriarch of the Chaldean Catholic Church. A former U.S. diplomat reacts. Plus, cause for concern. A Catholic OBGYN speaks out on the medical risks of the first ever over-the-counter contraceptive. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, President Joe Biden's schedule today included a private meeting at the White House with Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, Pope Francis's peace envoy. The visit is part of the Holy See's peace and humanitarian initiatives for Ukraine, with the plight of Ukrainian children taken to Russia topping the agenda. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, before Cardinal Zuppi's scheduled meeting with President Joe Biden, we spoke with Archbishop and current Cardinal-elect Christophe Pierre, who joined Cardinal Zuppi just across town at the Capitol.
At the U.S. Capitol this morning, Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, a veteran of the Catholic Church's peace initiatives, meets with U.S. lawmakers. Archbishop Christophe Pierre, the Vatican's U.S. ambassador, tells us the Cardinal is focused on the war in Ukraine.
You know that he has already been in Ukraine, he has been in Russia.
And now in the United States to promote peace, something that to date has been impossible to achieve.
The Holy Father wants to help in the process of peace, and he is fully aware of the difficulties, of the situations. I think, but he wants to, to introduce in the discussion, in the kind of dialogue.
The visit comes as Russia targets Ukraine's port of Odessa, calling it payback for a strike on a key bridge to Crimea. Ukraine says it shot down drones and cruise missiles. And in a statement previewing the visit, the White House said the president and Cardinal will also discuss efforts by the United States and Holy See to provide humanitarian aid to those affected, and the Papal See's focus on repatriating Ukrainian children forcibly deported by Russian officials. Just yesterday, in the daily White House press briefing, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said humanitarian concerns would be addressed, including
the thousands and thousands of Ukrainian children that have been shipped off to basically concentration camps in Russia or Russia-occupied territory.
Separately today, President Biden welcomed Israel's President Isaac Herzog to the White House, the two leaders seeking to sustain ties.
And we're committed as well to ensure that that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. So we got a lot to talk about.
President Biden also said in that Oval Office meeting his love for Israel is deep-rooted and long-lasting. He described the friendship between both nations as unbreakable, and he called America's commitment to Israel ironclad. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom says religious persecution is on the rise and we must speak out against it. A hearing on Capitol Hill highlights the worsening conditions for faiths around the world. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. Subcommittee Chair Republican Congressman Chris Smith says half of the world's population are not able to practice their faith freely. Many are brutally attacked, tortured, jailed, or even worse, slaughtered for their beliefs.
I am convinced that there's more the United States can do to protect and promote the freedom of religion worldwide.
Congressman Chris Smith says the State Department must bring either tougher sanctions, better monitoring, or regime changes. Experts testified North Korea topped the list as the most hostile place for Christians, where even owning a Bible is a crime and will be severely punished, followed by Somalia and Yemen. A country where Catholics are seeing increased persecution is Nigeria, where over 50,000 Christians have been killed over the past 15 years by Islamist militants, and another 18,000 churches burned.
But what's happening in Nigeria is of deep concern. We expect the newly elected government to take more of a leadership role here to promote and defend religious tolerance in Nigeria.
It's all about power and manipulation of trying to divide and conquer a population. And when you have individuals who are ready to do anything in order to stay in power.
Experts say, unfortunately, whether it's religious power or minority group, they end up paying the price many times with their lives. Lawmakers asked what more Congress can do.
But what we need to reclaim, and this is not just can be done by fiat, but we need to reclaim, when it comes to human rights and these precious freedoms, a sense of bipartisanship in Washington.
And other experts testified that religious freedom should not be thought of as a sole issue, but should be considered as an inclusive part of a larger economic and development policy. Tracy?
Eric, on a different note, I understand that Democrat Senator Joe Manchin, he is making some headlines regarding the upcoming presidential election. Tell us about that.
Well, I tell you what, Tracy, he certainly is. You know, Senator Joe Manchin continues to leave the door open to a third-party presidential run with a national group called No Labels. He and former Republican Governor Jon Huntsman of Utah appeared together at an event in New Hampshire last night, and Senator Manchin declined to rule out the run for the White House. And this has Democrats very upset because they believe that it could divide the Democratic Party and open up the door for a Republican to take the White House. Tracy?
All right. Thank you, Eric. Well, meanwhile, former President Donald Trump says that he is the target of another Justice Department investigation. He believes he is about to be indicted for trying to overturn the 2020 election. Top Republicans claim the probe is political.
President Trump went up in the polls and was actually surpassing President Biden for re-election. So what do they do now? Weaponize government to go after their number one opponent.
Former President Trump is already facing criminal charges for separate cases in New York and in Florida. This new case revolves around attempts to block the transfer of presidential power in the days leading up to the January 6th riot at the Capitol. An American soldier has been detained after crossing the border from South Korea into North Korea. According to U.S. officials, he did so willfully and without authorization. The American-led UN command said the soldier was on a tour of a Korean border village and then purposefully separated himself and ran away from the rest of the group. He is the first American to be detained in North Korea in 5 years. In Israel, protesters blocked highways, crowded train stations, and even marched on Tel Aviv's stock exchange and military headquarters as part of what is being called a day of disruption. The protests, which are expected to continue through the week, are aimed at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the government's plan to overhaul the country's judicial system. Joining us now to talk about this and more is Rabbi Yaakov Menken, Managing Director of the Coalition for Jewish Values. Rabbi Menken, great to be with you today. For those who aren't familiar, tell us a little bit more about these protests and how concerning is the situation?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. These protests have actually been ongoing for several months, ever since the country announced, the government announced a program of judicial reform. The Supreme Court in Israel operates without a constitution and without constitutional authority, and yet they arrogated upon themselves the ability to decide what laws are reasonable and which ones they wish to rewrite. So this was obviously something that had to happen. Unfortunately, the left has not only do they claim that they're not going to take this sitting down, but that they insist that it is the government, which is, of course, elected democratically, that by trying to rein in an unelected Supreme Court, and in fact, a Supreme Court that largely selected and has self-selected its own members, that it's reining in the Supreme Court, that's what's against democracy. Clearly, these protests are aimed to say that democracy is only right, and it's only democracy when things go our way.
Well, as we heard earlier from Owen Jensen, Israel's President Isaac Herzog met with President Joe Biden at the White House today. This after Biden spoke yesterday with Prime Minister Netanyahu about a broad range of issues. Rabbi, what do you hope will come from these talks? And also, what is the state of relations between the U.S. and Israel right now?
Well, largely the relationship is strong. I look forward to being in attendance tomorrow when President Herzog addresses Congress. And that is, of course, on Speaker McCarthy's invitation that he should come and address Congress. You should understand that the left, the leftists who don't claim, that they're just against Israel's government and just against Israel's policies, President Herzog is actually from the left. He's part of Israel's Labor Party. He's from the party that was fighting with Netanyahu for decades. So you would think that the left, if they actually were just against Israel's government policies, would turn out to support him. But no, we're seeing just the contrary, because it's all about Israel. It's all about being a Jewish country. This is classic bigotry. And that is coming from the leftist wing of the Democratic Party. The sad thing is that these are accepted. These people expressing this type of bigotry are accepted as members in good standing of that party. With that all said, I would have to concur with those who say more reasonably that the overwhelming majority of Congress is still very supportive of the Israel relationship, and that's what we hope to see continue.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of jump off of that and say I know there are a number of members, progressive House members, that are going to be boycotting his address at Congress tomorrow. And of course, this comes after Congresswoman Jayapal made comments over the weekend claiming that Israel is a racist state, and then, of course, walking back those comments. So I'm curious, what do you think this all signals? And also, Rabbi Menken, what will be your message to those who plan to boycott tomorrow?
Well, those who are boycotting, I said in response that Ilhan Omar should just permanently stay home. That's probably the best thing that she can do right now, because she's so busy working against American values. When you look at what Representative Jayapal had to say and Representative Tlaib, they're calling Israel racist and apartheid. You look at the rest of the countries in that region of the world, it's very clear. The only reason they're saying that is because Israel is the one country in that region that also gives civil rights to Jews. It's as hateful and as bigoted as that, and that's exactly what that boycott is about. And you have to also remember, these are the same people who spent July 4th tweeting about how terrible America is. They don't want to talk to you about what the rest of the world is like. They just want to tear down first world moral democracies like America and Israel.
Rabbi Menken, great to be with you as always. Thanks for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including a trial of faith. The patriarch of the Chaldean Catholic Church is forced to relocate after a revoked decree from the president of Iraq. We have reaction. And a testament of faith, how the Catholic Church in the Holy Land perseveres in times of hardship and persecution. Thanks for staying with us. Pope Francis has appointed 4 new auxiliary bishops to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Monsignor Albert Bahuth, Father Matthew Elshoff, Father Brian Nunez, and Father Shlamar Shredka will all be consecrated as bishops to assist Archbishop Jose Gomez. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles serves over 4 million Catholics, making it the largest archdiocese in the United States. So the patriarch of the Chaldean Catholic Church, Cardinal Louis Sako, announces his move to Kurdistan after Iraq's president revoked a decree recognizing him as the head of the Christian church in the country. Sako issued a statement calling the actions unprecedented and unfair. He will now be taking up residence in a monastery in Kurdistan, a region of Iraq considered to be autonomous. From there, he will continue to lead the Chaldean Church, which has hundreds of thousands of members across the world. And joining us now is former Ambassador Alberto Fernandez, the Vice President of the Middle East Media Research Institute. Ambassador, great to be with you today. Thank you so much for coming on. If you will, please put this into context for us. I mean, how significant is it that the President of Iraq revoked a decree recognizing Cardinal Sako as the head of the Christian church in Iraq?
Well, I'm glad to be on with you. It's unprecedented. It's never happened, even under the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein. This had never happened, this level of interference in the work of the church. So it's a very disturbing thing which has happened, totally unprecedented and really bad news. The Chaldean Christians, Chaldean Catholics have suffered greatly over the past 20 years, and this is a very worrying development. Yeah, it really is really concerning. What should we know about Cardinal Sako and his leadership in the church? He's been a faithful shepherd and a really good pastor. You know, he was made a bishop 21 years ago, right before the fall of the Saddam regime and the chaos which happened in Iraq and the great suffering of Iraqi Catholics and Iraqi Christians after the liberation of Iraq. He was, a bishop for 10 years, and then 10 years ago he became the patriarch of the Chaldean Catholic. So he's had to shepherd a flock which has been under unprecedented pressure. The attacks of ISIS, the chaos of the Americans being there and all the war and fighting and the flight of many Christians fleeing. I mean, he's had to shepherd the church in probably the most difficult period it's had since the 14th century when the Mongols were in Iraq.
I know in an open letter, he called this a deliberate and humiliating campaign. That said, what do you think the Iraqi president is trying to do here?
Well, Iraq is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And the president is with a faction which leans towards Iran. And there is a political group that claims to have authority over Iraqi Christians called Babylon, the Babylon group, or Babylon militia, or Babylon movement, which is in the pocket of Iran. And so there's a political element, and there's also a financial element. The church, the patriarch, is the custodian of large amounts of church property, especially in Baghdad, and of the Christian community in Baghdad. And the sense of many people, many observers, is that this is a political, financial move. It's a way of squeezing the church and squeezing land and property, valuable property, out of the church, which has very few defenders in Iraq. So it's seen as a juicy target, both by this mafia Babylon militia and its allies in the pro-Iranian militia political movement in Iraq, which is extremely powerful.
Well, Ambassador, I wish we had more time to talk about this, but thank you so much for weighing in. We really appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you.
The situation for Christians in the Middle East is dire. The Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre is a Catholic order of knighthood charged with helping to maintain the Christian presence in the Holy Land. Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President of EWTN News, spoke with Leonardo Visconti di Modrone, Governor General of the Order, to find out what they are doing to help.
Your Excellency, thank you for joining us today. I want to ask you about the situation that Christians are facing in the Holy Land. I know that this is a difficult situation for them economically and in other ways.
The Christians' presence in the Holy Land is declining, is constantly declining. Now, the reasons of this decline, actually there are many reasons, economic, social, and also political reasons. And this is something that we, as members of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre, try to prevent, to fight back, because we believe that the Christians' presence in the land of our Lord is essential, and the maintaining of Mother Church in Jerusalem is essential for our faith.
What is the Order doing right now to help the Christians there?
Well, in this very moment, we are concentrating our action in collecting resources to finance pastoral and humanitarian activities. And the second priority, but I would say equally important, is to promote education, to finance our schools, our Christian schools and university in the Holy Land, to form a new generation that is formed with our principles of dialogue, of friendship, of mutual understanding.
And I know you've been focused on the project here in this magnificent Palazzo della Rovere. Talk about that project briefly.
Well, this is a palazzo that was donated to the order by Pius XII. And why was it donated to Pius XII? I like to recall the parable of the talents in the Gospel. when the Lord leaves his home and gives several talents to his servants, according to their capacity. So what I believe is that Pope Pius XII gave this palazzo to the order because he thought that we were capable of doing something important with this palace. And that is what actually we are doing. We are hiring a part of this palazzo in order to have resources, additional resources, that not only will cover entirely the expenses of the Grand Magisterium, but will give us other resources for the Holy Land.
Very important work, and I know that you have many labors ahead of you, so you are in our prayers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Governor.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, speaking out, we discuss the medical risks of over-the-counter birth control with a Catholic OBGYN. We are back tonight on the optional memorial of St. Camillus, the patron saint of hospitals, nurses, healthcare workers, and of the sick. The Catholic Medical Association says it is deeply concerned with the FDA's decision to approve the first over-the-counter hormonal contraceptive pill called the Opill. Dr. Kathleen Ravelli, an OBGYN who is on CMA's board of directors, said, quote, "This shows a total lack of regard for a woman's health to offer a hormonal contraceptive available over-the-counter without medical supervision. These women deserve authentic medical care." And joining us now to discuss this and more is Dr. Lauren Rubal of the Catholic Medical Association. She is a specialist in reproductive endocrinology and infertility. Dr. Rubal, welcome back. So great to have you on the show again. As we know, the Catholic Church is very clear that it's morally evil to use contraception to prevent a human life. But can you explain the medical concerns with this birth control, especially as it can be dispensed without a prescription and apparently with no age restrictions?
Yes, thank you for having me. But absolutely, I think that there is significant medical concern as well. This is the first FDA-approved over-the-counter contraceptive method. And the way that they were able to somewhat speed up this approval in some ways is because it's comprised only of progesterone. It's a synthetic progesterone, different than our body's normal progesterone. However, this is what makes it known as the mini pill. It's not the classic birth control that's comprised of both a synthetic estrogen and progesterone together. With that being said, because of this, there isn't as much of the same risks of clotting in the blood vessels that the regular birth control with the combined estrogen and progesterone may have. However, there are still significant risk. And so I would say that both side effects and risks alone make it an issue that we want to see patients for and appropriately counsel them. The most common one that I would say is that, believe it or not, up to half of all women on this mini pill can have a longer bleeding duration, and up to 7% of women can have breakthrough bleeding. And so a woman may be taking this and note that her periods and her bleeding pattern completely go awry. That's one very common one. But I think that other ones that are very concerning to us, there still is an increased risk of cancers, even with progesterone-only contraception. And this includes breast cancer. Up to 30% increased risk in a recent UK study showed that this was present or associated with this. Potentially even types of brain cancers and cervical cancer. So very concerning, again, and people may not be getting appropriate care and just taking this over the counter.
Yeah, and what about those women who maybe have underlying medical conditions? I mean, is this especially dangerous for them?
Absolutely. And so another risk that we think of is if anyone has underlying liver issues. We do know that these contraceptives may still impact the liver. And this also highlights women who have mood symptoms. So many women, even up to a quarter of women prior to this decade, reported depression in some way, shape, or form. We do think that this is involved and related to hormones. And we know, based on very large-scale studies, that these artificial and synthetic hormones can significantly increase these risks of depression. And this effect is most pronounced in our teens. And here we are providing this over-the-counter access to really anyone, including teenagers who may use it. And we also know that this risk and finding of mood changes may persist even after a woman stops using this contraception. So I think very concerning.
Yeah.
Another issue that may be a factor for people with underlying conditions is that we know that this type of contraception may also increase blood pressure. And there is a suggestion that it may be associated potentially with lowering certain vitamins and minerals, which again, essential for so many of our different body processes.
Dr. Rubal, we are almost out of time, but quickly, I want to get you to weigh in on something here, how some doctors plan to use AI technology to assist with IVF, that is success, in particular with embryo selection. Really quickly, we know what the church teaches on this, but can you tell us the dangers on this as well?
Well, I would say that, first of all, just jumping into a new technology again without a significant amount of data behind it is always concerning. What it does is it uses AI to look at the embryo and follow time lapse as the embryo develops and grows. And so they help select which embryo to transfer back into a patient. But I found what was very interesting was this quote on their website, which said that it, quote, has the power to perform an initial triage of embryos that are not viable, helping to decrease the need for freezing and storage. And so this technology is going to be involved in determining which embryos are being destroyed. And so again, I think there's a lot of concern here, but in particular, that really stuck out to me.
We're going to have to leave it right there. Unfortunately, Dr. Rubal, great to have you on again and look forward to you coming back. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
And thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.